Hey, how's it going everybody? Thanks for tuning in, and in this video we're going to be installing the General Green Manufacturing 100 series bolt-on swing out tire carrier. The kit is comprised of three main parts. This part is the frame mount, and then you have the bumper mount and the tire carrier itself. So after you've removed your OEM bumper cover, you can start with the frame mount. Here I'm using the included hardware. At this step you want to tighten everything up so that way it sits flush against the frame. You don't want it loose or anything like that because you're going to be marking the location for where you need to drill on your OEM bumper cover. To mark the location on the bumper cover, I'm using a plumb bob, which I'm going to hang over the spindle so that way that can give me the exact location as to where I need to drill. You're preferably going to want to do this on flat ground, but since I was on the driveway, I had to make up for the incline. And now that you have the location marked, you can go ahead and remove the frame mount. And here I'm just using a piece of zip tie to extend the tip of the plumb bob to the exact location on the bumper. You're also going to need to drill a hole for the limit linkage mount. What I did was use a zip tie and measured off the spindle over to the limit linkage and then just cross-reference that distance over on the bumper cover. Once you're done measuring, you can go ahead and remove the bumper and start drilling through. I don't remember the exact size of the hole saw that I'm using, but it's easy enough to just match it up to the spindle. You will be opening up this hole a lot more because you need this tire carrier to actually swing out. Please use eye protection because accidents do happen. But here's a look at how much I actually had to cut away so that way the tire carrier can actually open up. And now that all the cutting is done, you can go ahead and reinstall the frame mount. This time you're going to be buttoning it down completely. You can also now reinstall the bumper cover, but don't worry, if you need to trim some more, it'll be easy enough to go around with the Dremel. And now the next step is the bumper mount. I'm choosing to install the bumper mount right over the bumper cover. Some people choose to actually just cut a piece away. But all I'm doing is just going from the backside and drilling holes straight through the two bottom holes of the pencil mount. And then you're going to want to open them up. From here you're going to want to insert the included hardware through the holes that you just drilled. That way you can mock up the bumper mount. Again, from the backside, I'm just using a zip tie to measure the distance between the bottom holes and the top holes, and then just making a mark right through the bumper mount itself. Just like you did on the bottom, you're going to drill your holes and then you're going to open them up, but this time be careful because the holes on the other side are actually threaded. The two up top thread directly to the body while the two on the bottom are secured by nuts. If you're keeping your mud flaps, you can go ahead and skip this part, but I'm going with some mud flap deletes and repainting the OEM bumper. Moving on to the actual carrier, all you need to do is grease the bearings and just push them in. The races have already been installed, so all you're doing are gliding the bearings in. And then the supplied end cap just needs to be tapped in on the bottom. I'm just using a rubber mallet. Now I learned this the hard way, but do not paint the actual spindle. Painting the spindle won't allow the bearing to slide down easily, and it gets stuck, and during this process I actually cracked the taillight. So after a quick Plasti Dip spray, I'm reinstalling the bumper cover, but this time I'm installing it with the mud flap deletes from Land Cruiser Phil. They're so easy to install, you don't need to worry about ripping the mud flaps off on the trail, and they add to the look of the truck, honestly. But now moving on to installing the bumper mount again. When installing the bumper mount, don't tighten it just yet because you still have to make some adjustments once you install the tire carrier. And now we can move on to actually installing the tire carrier. Once I had removed the paint from the spindle, the tire carrier easily slides on. Again, you want to be very careful not to damage your taillight, and actually I recommend just removing it altogether. Now that the tire carrier is installed, go ahead and take the included washer and place it over the bearing. The tube on this tire carrier was damaged during shipping. They must have dropped it really hard. And so all I had to do was take my vice grips and bend this part back to make sure that the washer can sit flush. And here's a look at the damage to the taillight. It's definitely cracked. Again, recommend taking it off. After the washer, you go ahead and tighten down the castle nut. You're going to be inserting a cotter pin through here, so make sure to time the castle nut correctly so that way the cotter pin has free range to pass through. And then after the cotter pin, you can go ahead and put the cap on. I had some issues here because of the bent tubing. The cap wouldn't sit all the way. I need to figure out a solution for this part. And now let's move on to all the hardware for the bumper mount. I'm starting with the rubber pad where the actual tire carrier is going to sit, and then installing the latch system with all the included hardware. For the actual latch, I locked it to the bumper mount, and now I'm just tightening these lockdown screws so I can get the proper tension that's required to hold this thing in place. If you don't tighten this down enough, this thing will open up on you and swing out. Now once you've confirmed your fitment, you want to go ahead and tighten everything down. And so now the last part of this is installing the limit linkage. The linkage comes in two pieces. The first piece you want to install right side up, so that way you don't rub the bumper when you're opening it. It's hard to explain, but you'll see it once you have it in person. And now the second piece will have this little edge that's going to sit over the first bar. And then you're securing that to this location on the tire carrier. This is the third hole on the bottom of the carrier. The kit will come with a bunch of washers to place here so that way you can adjust the angle of the linkage. And now this nut and bolt here, you don't want to tighten down too much because you'll have a hard time opening and closing the linkage. Here's another look at how much I had to cut away on the bumper for the actual tire carrier to function properly. Again, you want to measure, take your time, but don't be afraid to cut more if you have to, because what I did was add some rubber trim around this to really clean it up. And that's it, everyone. You should be finished. It's not that hard. There is a lot more cutting involved, I would say, compared to the 80 series. But again, some rubber trim around that part really cleaned it up. It's definitely not a hard install. And again, I'm not the most mechanically inclined. I mean, I know my ins and outs, but this is something definitely for beginners. I should also mention that there is a Zerk fitting on the tube of the tire carrier, so all you have to do is take a grease gun and fill that area with grease. This setup is very solid and lightweight in relation to a full bumper. So here's what it looks like out on the trail. This setup is a budget-friendly option for those of you who are looking for a tire carrier but don't want to invest in a full bumper because of cost and weight or anything like that. Designed with modularity in mind, this setup allows you to add any accessories that you want, not specific to any brand. As long as you can find a way to make it fit, it'll work. Coming from an ARB bumper that we used to have on this 100, I love how lightweight this tire carrier really is. You can definitely feel a difference in the drive. So tell me what you guys think down in the comments. If you're interested in purchasing this tire carrier, head over to generalgreenmanufacturing.com and be sure to use discount code CRUISIN5.